My daughter claimed my savings were gone. I let her think so until the will was read. The lawyer's voice was steady as he read the final clause, but I watched my daughter's face collapse in on itself like wet paper. She had expected everything: the house, the accounts, the investments I had spent 40 years building. What she got instead was a single line explaining why she would receive nothing at all, and the name of the person who would inherit what she believed no longer existed. Her hands were shaking when she looked up at me across that polished conference table. I met her eyes without blinking. There was a moment just before her lawyer leaned in to whisper something urgent when I saw her understand that I had known all along, that every word she had spoken to me over the last 18 months had been a performance I had been studying in silence. I had not raised my voice once, not when I found the forged documents, not when I traced the withdrawals, not when I sat across from her at Sunday dinners and watched her lie with the ease of someone who believed I was too old, too trusting, or too tired to notice. I am 63 years old. I wake at 5:30 every morning and drink my coffee black while the house is still dark. My knees ache when the weather turns, and I keep reading glasses in 3 rooms because I misplace them constantly. I am not a man who raises his voice. I spent 38 years as a senior auditor for mid-sized firms, and I learned early that the loudest person in the room is rarely the one in control. Control comes from patience, from watching, from knowing exactly what the numbers say before anyone else has finished guessing. My wife died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, 8 months from diagnosis to the end. Our daughter was 31 then. She came to the hospital 3 times. Twice she left early because of work. The 3rd time she stayed through the night, but only because I had asked her directly, and even then she spent most of it in the hallway on her phone. When her mother passed, she cried at the service. I do not doubt the tears were real. I also do not doubt that she had already begun calculating what the house might be worth. We had been close once. When she was young, she used to sit on the kitchen counter and help me check receipts against the grocery bill. She liked the precision of it, the way numbers could be made to behave. She went to college on a partial scholarship and finished her degree in marketing. She married a man named Derek who worked in medical device sales. They had no children. They lived in a new construction townhouse 40 minutes south, and for a few years we saw each other every few weeks. Then her mother got sick, and I noticed the visits became shorter, more distracted. After the funeral, they became less frequent altogether. I did not chase her. I have never believed in forcing affection. But I noticed when the phone calls shifted from questions about my health to questions about my plans. Whether I had thought about selling the house, whether I had updated my will recently, whether I knew that property taxes in my neighborhood had gone up. I told her I was managing fine. That part was true. I had a pension, Social Security, and the savings I had built through 40 years of caution and compounding interest. The house was paid off. I had no debt. I lived simply, and I had enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life, with a significant amount left over to pass on when the time came. I had always assumed that money would go to her. Then one morning in March, I received a letter from the bank. It was a courtesy notification regarding a large withdrawal from my savings account. The amount was $63,000. The letter thanked me for my years of loyalty and reminded me that I could contact them at any time with questions. I sat at the kitchen table and read it 3 times. Then I called the bank. The representative was polite and efficient. She confirmed the withdrawal. She confirmed the date. She confirmed that it had been processed in person at a branch I had not visited in over 2 years. When I asked how that was possible, she paused. Then she explained that the transaction had been authorized with my signature and identification. I told her I had not authorized anything. She put me on hold. When she returned, her tone had changed. She said she would need to escalate the matter, and that someone from their fraud department would contact me within 48 hours. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat very still and thought about who had access to my documents. The call from the fraud investigator came the next afternoon. He was a man named Paul, and he spoke with the careful neutrality of someone trained to deliver bad news without assuming guilt. He explained that the withdrawal had been made using a signed authorization form and a photocopy of my driver's license. He asked if I had given anyone permission to act on my behalf. I said I had not. He asked if anyone else had access to my personal documents. I told him my daughter had a key to the house, that she had helped me organize paperwork after my wife died, that she had offered, more than once, to help me simplify my accounts. Paul was quiet for a moment. Then he said they would open a formal investigation, and that I should consider securing my remaining accounts. He recommended I change my passwords and retrieve any documents I considered sensitive. He did not say what I was already thinking. He did not need to. I spent the rest of that day going through my files. My wife had kept everything organized in a filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. After she passed, I had let some of that order slip, and my daughter had noticed. She had offered to help. I had been grateful. I remembered her sitting on the floor of that room, sorting papers into stacks, asking questions about which accounts were still active and which could be closed. I remembered telling her where I kept my license. I remembered her taking photos of documents with her phone so she could follow up with banks and insurance companies on my behalf. I remembered thanking her for her help. Now I pulled out the folder labeled with the bank's name. Inside were statements going back 5 years. I went through them month by month. The withdrawals had started small. 500 here, 1,000 there. Amounts that could be explained as legitimate expenses if anyone asked. They had escalated gradually over the past year. The $63,000 withdrawal was only the largest. It was not the first. I did not call her, not yet. I wanted to see the signatures first. The bank sent me copies of the authorization forms by secure email 3 days later. I printed them and laid them out on the kitchen table under the old brass lamp my wife had insisted we keep. The signatures were good. Not perfect, but good. My handwriting has a slight rightward slant and a tendency to compress the loops in my capital letters. The forged signatures replicated that. Whoever had practiced them had done so carefully. I thought about the Sunday dinners, the way she had started bringing paperwork for me to sign, updates to insurance beneficiaries, a form to consolidate old retirement accounts. I had signed them without reading closely because she was my daughter, and I had trusted her to have my interests in mind. Now I wondered how many of those documents had been real. I made a list. I wrote down every account I could remember, every insurance policy, every investment. Then I began making calls. It took 2 weeks to build a full picture. The savings account was the largest single loss, but there had been others. A line of credit opened in my name and drawn to its limit. A transfer from a brokerage account I rarely monitored. Smaller sums from a joint account I had kept with my wife and never closed. In total, the amount exceeded $90,000. I reported it all to the police. The officer who took my statement was younger than my daughter, and I could see the discomfort in his face when I explained who I suspected. He asked if I was sure. I showed him the documents. He asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I wanted the investigation to proceed and that I would cooperate fully. Then I called my daughter. She answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice was bright, the way it always was when she had not seen me recently. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was fine, but that something had come up with the bank. I said there had been some irregular activity on my accounts and that I was working with them to sort it out. I kept my tone light, concerned, but not accusatory. She asked what kind of activity. I said it looked like someone had accessed my savings without my knowledge, that the bank was investigating, and that the police were involved now. There was a pause. Then she said that sounded serious. She asked if I needed help, if there was anything she could do. I told her I was managing, but that I appreciated the offer. I said I would keep her updated. Then I asked if she was free for dinner on Sunday. She said she was. That dinner was the first time I had to sit across from her and pretend I did not know. She arrived with Derek, and they brought a bottle of wine I did not drink. She hugged me at the door and asked again about the bank situation. I told her the investigation was ongoing, that these things took time. She nodded with what looked like genuine sympathy and said she hoped it would be resolved soon. We ate the roast I had made, and she complimented the potatoes. Derek talked about a new client his company had landed. I asked polite questions and listened to answers I would not remember. At one point, my daughter reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said she worried about me living alone, that I should let her help more. I thanked her and said I was doing fine. After they left, I sat in the kitchen and thought about the way her hand had felt, warm and smooth and steady. The hand of someone who had decided that what she had done was justified, that I would never notice, or that if I did, I would forgive her because she was my daughter, and that was what fathers did. I had already decided I would not. The police investigation moved slowly. Fraud cases always do. There were interviews and document reviews and consultations with handwriting analysts. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Valerie Santos, called me every 2 weeks with updates. She was thorough and patient, and she never once suggested I was wasting her time. In our third conversation, she told me they had enough evidence to bring charges. She said the signatures were clear forgeries, and that the access to my documents established means and opportunity. She asked if I was prepared for what came next. I said I was. She told me they would move forward, but that I should expect my daughter to be contacted soon. She warned me that family cases were complicated, that I should prepare myself for difficult conversations. I thanked her and said I understood. But I had already decided I would not confront my daughter directly. Not yet, because I had realized something in those weeks of waiting. My daughter had not just stolen from me. She had calculated that I was too old, too isolated, or too sentimental to hold her accountable. She had built her plan on the assumption that I would rather lose the money than lose her. And I wanted her to keep believing that until the moment it no longer mattered. So I continued the Sunday dinners. I answered her phone calls. I let her ask about my health and my plans. When she suggested again that I should consider selling the house, I said I would think about it. When she asked if I had updated my will recently, I said I had not, but that it was something I should probably do. She offered to help. She said she knew a lawyer who could handle it efficiently. I told her I appreciated the offer, but that I had already scheduled an appointment with my own attorney. That part was true. I had called Martin Kessler the same week I received the bank letter. Martin had handled my wife's estate, and I trusted him to be discreet. I told him everything. I showed him the documents, the police reports, the evidence I had gathered. Then I told him what I wanted to do. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me for a long moment. Then he asked if I was certain. I said I was. He nodded slowly and said he would draft the documents. The new will was executed 6 weeks later. It was simple and clear. It revoked all prior wills and codicils. It named my executor. It distributed my assets to a single beneficiary, with one exception. A letter, to be read aloud at the reading of the will, explained why my daughter would receive nothing. It did not editorialize. It did not plead. It simply stated the facts, the forgeries, the withdrawals, the betrayal of trust, and it named the person who would inherit everything instead. That person was my wife's sister, Elena. She was 68 years old and lived 3 hours north in a small house she had bought with her late husband's pension. She had visited us every few months when my wife was alive, and she had called me regularly after the funeral to check in. She had never asked for anything. When I told her what I was planning, she cried. She said she did not need the money. I told her it was not about need. It was about the kind of person who shows up. The charges were filed 4 months after the initial report. My daughter was arrested quietly, processed, and released on bail the same day. Her lawyer arranged for her to avoid a public hearing in exchange for a plea agreement. She would repay the full amount, accept a suspended sentence, and complete 200 hours of community service. There would be no prison time. Her record would be sealed after 5 years if she complied with all terms. I was informed of the plea by Detective Santos. She asked if I found it acceptable. I said I did. The goal had never been punishment. It had been accountability. My daughter did not call me after the arrest. Neither did Derek. For 3 months, there was silence. I continued my routines. I woke early, drank my coffee, read the paper. I worked in the garden on weekends. I saw Elena twice during that time. We had lunch, and I told her the full story. She asked if I was all right. I said I was. Then one evening, my daughter appeared at the door. I had just finished dinner. I was washing the dishes when I heard the knock. I dried my hands and answered. She was standing on the porch in the light from the carriage lamp, and she looked smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were red. She did not wait for me to speak. She said she was sorry. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the living room, and I waited. She cried for a while, and then she tried to explain. She said they had been in debt, that Derek's commissions had been cut, that they were behind on the mortgage and the car payments and the credit cards, that she had panicked, that she had convinced herself I would not miss the money, that she had planned to pay it back before I noticed. I listened until she finished. Then I asked her why she had not simply asked me for help. She looked at me and said she had been too ashamed. I told her that shame was not an excuse for theft, that if she had come to me honestly, I would have helped her, that what she had done instead was not a mistake, it was a choice, and it was a choice that had destroyed my ability to trust her. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I told her I did not know. That forgiveness was not something I could promise, but that I hoped she would use the consequences she was facing to build a better version of herself. Then I asked her to leave. She stood slowly. She looked around the room as if she were trying to memorize it. Then she walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back and asked if she would ever see me again. I told her that would depend on who she chose to become. She left without another word. I did not see her again for 14 months. During that time, I received updates from Martin about the restitution payments. They arrived on schedule every month, in the exact amounts required by the plea agreement. I did not acknowledge them. I simply watched the balance rebuild. I also began to prepare for my own future. I updated my medical directives. I prepaid my funeral expenses. I made sure Elena had copies of every document she would need when the time came. And I continued living quietly, with the knowledge that I had drawn a line that would not be crossed again. The call came on a Tuesday in November. It was from a hospital in the next county. The nurse on the line said my daughter had been in a car accident, that she was stable, but that she had listed me as her emergency contact. They asked if I could come. I drove there in silence. When I arrived, I was directed to a room on the 3rd floor. She was awake when I entered. her arm in a sling and a bandage across her forehead. She looked at me with something that might have been relief or fear. I could not tell which. I asked if she was all right. She nodded and said it had been a minor collision. That she was fine? Then she said she had not known who else to call. I pulled a chair close to the bed and sat. We did not speak for a while. Then she asked if I had meant what I said, that whether I saw her again would depend on who she became. I said I had. She told me she had finished her community service, that she and Derek had sold the townhouse and moved into an apartment, that they were rebuilding slowly, and that she was working 2 jobs to stay ahead of the payments. She said it was hard, but that it was also clarifying, that she was learning what mattered. I told her I was glad to hear it. She asked if there was any chance I would change my mind, about the will, about giving her another opportunity. I told her the will was final, that the choices she had made carried consequences that could not be undone, but that I did not need her to inherit anything to know she was capable of doing better, that the measure of her life would not be what she received from me, but what she built on her own. She cried again, quietly this time, and I sat with her until the nurse came to check her vitals. Then I stood and told her I hoped she would recover quickly. She asked if I would visit again. I told her I would think about it. I visited her twice more over the following months. Brief visits, careful and measured. We did not speak about the money or the will. We spoke about small things, her work, her health, the weather. It was not reconciliation. It was a cautious détente between 2 people who had lost the ability to trust each other fully, but had not yet surrendered the idea that some limited connection might still be possible. I did not change the will. When I died, it was sudden. A heart attack in my sleep on a cold morning in February, 16 months after that last hospital visit. I was 65. Elena found me when she came by for our weekly coffee. The funeral was small. Elena arranged everything according to the instructions I had left. My daughter attended. She sat in the back and did not speak to anyone. When the service ended, she left before Elena could approach her. The will was read 3 weeks later in Martin Kessler's office. Elena was there. My daughter and Derek were there. Martin's associate was present as a witness. The room was silent as Martin began. He read through the standard provisions first. The appointment of Elena as executor. The disposition of personal effects. Then he reached the clause that mattered. He read it slowly and without inflection. It stated that my daughter would receive no portion of my estate, that the full value of my remaining assets, including the house, the investments, and all accounts, would pass to Elena. And then he read the letter. The letter explained everything. The forgeries, the theft, the betrayal of trust. It did not condemn. It simply stated what had happened, and why I had made the decision I had. It ended with a single sentence. I hope you will build a life that does not require taking from others. When Martin finished reading, the room stayed silent. I imagine my daughter's face collapsing the way I described at the beginning. I imagine her hands shaking. I imagine Derek leaning in, whispering something urgent and useless. I imagine Elena sitting quietly, her own face tight with sorrow, because she had loved my daughter once too. I was not there to see it, but I had seen it in my mind 100 times while I planned, and I had made peace with it. Because the point was never cruelty, it was clarity. My daughter had believed she could take what was mine, and that I would be too weak, too old, or too sentimental to stop her. She had been wrong, and the consequence was not just the loss of an inheritance. It was the knowledge that I had seen her clearly, that I had responded with precision and patience, and that I had drawn a line she could not cross. I do not know what happened to her after that. I do not know if she rebuilt her life with integrity or if she found new shortcuts. I do not know if she ever forgave herself or if she simply buried the shame deeper. Those were her questions to answer. What I know is that I spent my final years with my boundaries intact, that I did not allow love to be weaponized against me, that I rewarded loyalty and punished betrayal in the way I had been taught by 4 decades of auditing other people's numbers. You find the discrepancy, you trace it to its source, you correct it, and you move forward. Elena used the inheritance to pay off her house and set up a small scholarship fund in my wife's name. She told me once, years before I died, that she wished my daughter had been different. I told her I did as well. But wishing does not change what is, and what is must be dealt with clearly. I think about my daughter sometimes. I think about the girl who used to sit on the kitchen counter and check grocery receipts with me. I think about the moment when she decided that taking from me was easier than asking. I think about whether I could have stopped it sooner, or whether the rot had already set in by the time I noticed. But I do not regret what I did. I protected what I had built. I rewarded someone who had shown up when it mattered, and I made sure that my daughter understood, in the clearest possible terms, that betrayal carries a cost. If that makes me unforgiving, then I accept that. Forgiveness is a gift, not an obligation, and some actions place themselves beyond the reach of gifts. I lived the last years of my life in peace. I woke early, I drank my coffee black, I tended my garden and paid my bills and kept my affairs in order. I did not owe anyone an explanation, and I did not seek anyone's approval. When the lawyer read that final line, I imagine the room stayed quiet for a long time. I imagine my daughter stood and left without a word, or maybe she stayed and argued, or maybe she simply sat and stared at the table. It does not matter. The outcome was already written. I had let her think the money was gone, that her theft had succeeded, and that I was too diminished to recover. And then, at the moment when it mattered most, I showed her that I had known all along, that I had been watching, that I had been planning, and that the price of her betrayal was everything she had assumed would one day be hers. That is the story. That is what I wanted her to understand. Not that I hated her, not that I wanted revenge, but that trust, once broken, is not repaired by time or tears or apologies spoken in hospital rooms. It is rebuilt through action, through years of consistent integrity. Or it is not rebuilt at all. She had chosen the easier path. I had chosen the honest one. And in the end, honesty is the only inheritance that matters.